to refrain from using the chat, and to contact your counselors in another way possible. You can find their contact information on the WUSA website to ease us in guiding this discussion. Counselors will have their names put on the speaking order, and if a counselor chooses to sponsor a member wishing to speak to the motion, they will be called upon, and then the counselor will say, I yield my time to the name of the member who's present, at which point you will be allowed to speak. Having said that, next on our speaking order, following Matthew, is Cannon.
I was gonna say two things. You already covered half of it. Ben, the other thing was, would you be able to go over the rules against, because I think we have had some new at-large members join us, about code of conduct and making sure no one is abusing the chat?
Sure. Vincent, I see your comment. Okay, so I'll allow. Okay, so I'll bring up that. Yeah. So meeting etiquette. So for those of us who are joining, we went over this earlier. Council is a professional setting, so that means to treat the assembly, its members, and our guests with respect. This means always acting in good faith, which implies assuming that everybody wants the best outcome for students. That's why we're here, of course. No abusive language towards others, including threats or cursing. The chat is to be used for the following purposes: requesting speaking turns by entering 1, requesting direct responses by entering 2, raising points of order, privilege, or inquiry by entering those points, and for officers to pass information. So for the at-large members who are here and will wish to be sponsored, just if you type in the chat, like request to sponsor, like say something like that, to that effect, then a counselor, when it comes to their turn, they can choose to say, I sponsored this member, and the onus will be on counselors to say that. We are not keeping a speaking order for at-large members. We're keeping a speaking order for counselors. Counselors can sponsor those members as they see in the chat. Other uses of the chat for like side comments will not be recognized. If you have an issue with the way that the meeting is being conducted for counselors, you can raise a point of order, point of inquiry, point of privilege. Otherwise, for the sake of us running the meeting, it really helps to keep the chat simplified. And I hope that clarifies questions for people. So now, so Cannon, you had your speaking turn. That means we go to Catherine.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak to how this fee model will benefit the student life offerings that we have from WUSA. So there are 3 main components to this. So that's clubs, services, and events. In terms of clubs, when we were at an optional model, it was incredibly difficult to police access to clubs, because obviously we want all students to be able to access clubs. And with hundreds of active clubs, it's absolutely infeasible and inefficient to be policing who can access clubs, checking like, hey, have you paid your fee before we let you join a club? Right now, we do have some amount of checking in place for executives of clubs, but in terms of members, we want to be able to promote that sense of community and access to campus life for as many students as possible. So shifting to a mandatory fee model lets us lower costs for students who do choose to pay the fee in good faith, and it lets us know that everybody is contributing to the fund that funds the clubs that they are part of. Similarly with WUSA services, right now we are able to verify the identities of coordinators and some executives, but there are volunteers across our 12 services, as well as the thousands of students that have access to our services, some of which are more social and some of which include health and safety components. So we have peer support services, we have the campus response team that provides health and safety, as well as we provide a food support service. We don't police who can access these because we want to create a safe and inclusive environment for everybody. And it would be absurd, for somebody to come up and come to the food services and we say, have you paid your fee? And now we have to require them to pay, an artificially inflated fee because people are choosing to opt out of something, whether they use it or not, because we let students use services even if they have opted out of fees, because we believe that all students should have access to these services. So this presents a free rider problem where it's in every individual student's best interests to opt out and save themselves the money. But altogether, this results in this compounding problem of fees having to go up and inflate every single year until either, fees become unreasonable, or we have to shut down services that a lot of students find absolutely essential. And finally, we have events. Events are the only component of student life where we have had some amount of success in policing access, and this is all information that you can find in the fee review report. However, policing access to these events led us to two big realizations, I guess, two big conclusions, which is one, there were hundreds of students who came to these events, and then we had to manually opt them in. So one, to police these events, we had to use staff hours, paid overtime to come and help us police these events. And then second of all the administrative costs of money and time to help opt students in didn't even cover the revenue that we gained from students opting in didn't even cover all of those costs that we had to use to try and, police and opt-in students so that they didn't have to get checked every single time they're going into events anymore. Mandatory fees lowers costs for the average student and allows everybody to access services without all of these unnecessary overheads that we're forced to implement to try and mitigate a lot of the economic, I guess, problems that come with an opt-out fees model. And I highly, highly recommend that you vote in favor of this. Right now, obviously, our student life offerings look different because we're online, but going into fall, a lot of students will be coming back to campus, and WUSA fully intends to follow students back to campus as public health guidelines allow. So especially for students who have never been on campus, I really urge you to remember that what you've seen so far is not all of what WUSA can do. We haven't been policing when we're online because we want students to be able to access the services that we provide, and we want to do that as much as we're able to. But as we go back to campus.
Thank you, Catherine. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
Oh, yes.
That's 4 minutes. Next is Vincent.
Hi. So as I mentioned during my council report, I received 7 emails against this motion and 13 emails in favor of this motion, 1 email asking for a referendum. I was originally unsure about this motion. While I understand the importance of making the advocacy mandatory, as all students inherently benefit from the advocacy we do, it made a bit less sense to me why we would make the student life fee mandatory. However, after spending the past several days talking to students, counselors, and the VPOF, it began to make a lot of sense to me why this fee should be mandatory. So first, opt-in rates for the student life fees were decently high before COVID. Around 70 to 80% of students paid those fees before COVID. We also found that a lot of students didn't really understand what fees they had opted out of. While it wasn't feasible to have bouncers scanning walk cards at all WUSA and club events, at each event where we did do that, we signed up 100+ students to pay those fees who previously hadn't. So a lot of students actually want these services, but they just didn't know prior to paying fees what the fees include. To me, that shows 2 things. Students really like the student life services we offer, and we do a poor job of communicating to students about what these fees cover, and the latter is definitely something we need to improve on. Currently, we end up having to waste a lot of resources paying staff overtime to act as bouncers, manage a cash register at our events in order to make sure that students who participate actually paid their fees. This is a massive waste of money. By making the fee mandatory, we will no longer need to police all of the events, and those savings actually mean this change will reduce the total amount of money that WUSA expects to bring in. Without this waste, we're able to not only lower the mandatory fees compared to when they were optional, but we're actually able to offer the same things to students while spending less money in total. And those were the arguments that convinced me that the student life fee should be mandatory when we're in person, but I was still a bit unsure of why this makes sense to be in place for fall 2021 when we're unsure of how much in-person events we'll be able to have. So I asked around for some details on our extremely tentative plans. And my understanding is we are hoping to offer as much in-person events and services as public health allows. With Canada currently on track to vaccinate everyone by early fall, I am very hopeful that we will be able to offer the in-person programming that we usually do, albeit possibly in a modified form, at least in the middle and end of the fall term. For instance, one of the ideas I heard bouncing around a few places was to do an outdoor prom for all the first years and second years who had their prom canceled. I think events like that are what we need to ensure that we have a bright and vibrant campus life. Waterloo already has enough of a reputation as a depressing school, and defunding our ability to hold fantastic events that bring students joy will just make that worse. The university itself does very little to support students socially and is pretty lacking in mental health supports as well. WUSA is the only body on campus that is well placed to support students in making campus an enjoyable place to be. And even if you're not as optimistic as I am about the vaccination timelines, it's a massive logistical pain to make this change. And so delaying this change for student life services until an after fall term just isn't very feasible. The student life fee funds more than events and clubs. It also funds health and safety services on campus. One of the things this includes is the food bank WUSA runs to make sure that students who are struggling financially are able to eat. If we defund the food bank by making the fee optional, we will have no choice but to police access to the food bank. I do not want WUSA to have to tell starving students that they cannot access the food bank until they pay their student life fee, which would be artificially inflated by all the students who are not paying into it while still reaping all the benefits of the student life work that WUSA does on campus. However, if the student life fee is optional, WUSA will have no choice but to restrict access to the food bank, among other critical services. Of course, the proposal wouldn't make any fees besides advocacy and student life mandatory. All the other fees in the motion, it either keeps as mandatory or keeps as optional and doesn't touch a bunch of other fees. Despite all that, I just have a couple remaining questions that I've heard from my constituents and weren't addressed above.
Sorry, Vincent, that's 4 minutes.
Okay.
You can request additional speaking time, but sorry, for the interest of time, I'm gonna have to cut you off. It flies 4 minutes. Next is Jay.
Hi, counselor and student. I would like to invite you to take a look at page 115 on the agenda. There's a table there. It's clearly that like 47% to 49% of students choose to opt out their fees in the past winter term. Why they opt out their fees? They don't want to participate in events, in clubs. They don't want to do that. Why students should pay their fees for something they don't want? Thanks for the two. Okay. If I don't want to buy a water bottle, I will never pay for it. If a student don't want to pay for a club or events fee, they are here to Waterloo for education. They don't want to participate in any events. Why they should pay the fee? In response to students who didn't pay this fee and still go to the event, I would like to encourage Matthew and Catherine to bring up the data. How many students who didn't pay the fee are still go to the event? You are just saying like the 100 students. Remember, 10,000 students opt out the fee, and only like 100 or 200 students didn't pay the fee, still go to the event. This is like you send like 10,000 people to electric chair. Only you suspect 100 of them.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, Jay. Jay, that is inappropriate language. You likening mandatory fees to killing people is inappropriate, not acceptable. Sorry. So I ask you to apologize to the assembly.
I apologize for that. That's just a metaphor I want to use. That my point is like you don't have the data in your hand. You only say like hundreds of students.
There's a point of order from Vincent.
Yeah, I don't think Jay properly withdrew his inflammatory remarks.
I apologize for my remark for being not.
I request that
careful about
the
my
member
language.
withdraw his remark.
I think he has sufficiently, Vincent. You can continue, Jay.
Sorry, I apologize, but it's not very good. Matter I will use another one. So one yesterday, Matthew and I were in the meeting. He brought out like the student fee is like a taxes system. If in the tax system, you earn more, you pay more. You earn nothing, you pay nothing. This is like our events. If you don't want to participate, you pay nothing. If you want to participate in the events, you pay the fee. Okay, that's the conclusion for the events. For advocacy, I'm for the mandatory advocacy fee, but I want to read out one student's comment. He said, his name is Sam Gunter. I'm not sure if he's here, but I will read his comment. A number of students, on the advocacy fee specifically, from the point of view of someone who supports the majority of all USA advocates, it makes sense it could feel like students who do not pay are freeloading. But for a number of students, this would force them to pay for something that advocate against their interest. No one should be forced to fund something that goes against their political views while claiming it represents them. And for Vincent's comment, no one wants to ask students to pay for food bank, etc. So this is not to change. This will not to change like the current operation fee or fees go to food bank to optional. This will only change events, clubs, and advocacy fee. For this motion, I support the mandatory fee for advocacy, but I do not support the mandatory fee for clubs and events. That's it. Thank you. Apologize again for my language.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for apologizing. So Matthew had a direct response.
Yeah, thank you so much for those perspectives, Jay. There's a lot of very, very important perspectives from students and a lot of very important questions there. But I think there's some insight that I can kind of offer you on sort of some of the differences between WUSA and some of the other things we're used to. So I'll try to touch on whatever I can. And if I miss anything, just let me know and I can touch upon that as well. So one of the first things that stood out to me is the likening of WUSA to a business or something like that when you liken to buying a water bottle or going to a store. And this is a very common way for people to think about WUSA, but I don't think that it's quite contains all the nuance. If there's a store at the end of the street that, you know, for whatever reason isn't doing things you like anymore, you choose to stop buying things in there. You vote with your wallet, you vote with your money, and then the store owner says, oh, people aren't coming in here anymore. I'm going to change my service offering. Store owner can invest some of his own money. Store owner can take on external investors, could take out a loan to support an expansion of services. But WUSA is not a for-profit corporation. We are a non-profit corporation that is by and large owned by our members. The only person that you can liken to the store owner in this analogy is students. So if students want to see anything improve on our campus, if they want to see better offerings at Student Life, better offerings at events, if they have the approach that, oh, I'll opt in when events get good, events will never get good because things cost money and students are the real owners. That's where responsibility lies to improve things on our campus because that's how WUSA works. And we liken sort of voting with your wallet when it comes to a business because you can't vote in any other way. But WUSA is a democracy. We are a democratic, student-run and student-owned organization. Students don't need to vote with their wallet because they can vote with their actual vote. They get to elect all the counselors on this council. They get to elect me and the other executives. And that's where students' choices come into play. So if students don't want us to be doing something anymore, the key isn't to just defund those from the front and then leave those services to straggle and die. The key is to go to counselors and have counselors change the substantive mission and operations of WUSA. So if they don't like this, if they don't like that, they come to their counselors and say, hey, I don't like this. Can you work with me to change it? And that's how that works. That's the right way of working within WUSA. One of the other things I wanted to touch upon while I have a moment is advocacy, because advocacy is touchy. And I understand students when they talk about little points of advocacy that they disagree with. I understand the concerns around that.
30 seconds, Matthew.
Oh, of course. But broadly, advocacy at WUSA has a very high return on investment. Over the pandemic, WUSA's advocacy, and I can expand on this if you like, has saved students anywhere between $100 and $200, maybe even $300 a term in actual real dollars that students didn't have to pay, which is many times the cost of all of WUSA services put together. WUSA earns students more money than it costs far and away every term, every time.
Thanks, Matthew. Jay has a direct response.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for clarification. But the point is easy. This is like, I believe that like WUSA, although it's like guys are like, oh. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Not really.
Sorry, you kind of cut out.
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Although Matthew said like WUSA is not business, of course, this WUSA is a student. Oh, it's just like a lot of noise. Can you guys hear me now? Because there's a lot of noise.
We can hear you, but
I'm getting
a little
that
bit
through
of
Matthew's microphone. If Matthew can turn off his microphone, I think it'll be good.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. As Matthew said, like WUSA is not a business. It's not like buying a water bottle, but the details is the same. The students don't want to do the events. If you take a look at the table I show on page 115, 10,000 students opt out their fees. So that only shows two things. One, students don't want to do things. Second, WUSA don't organize good events. There's only two reasons why there's a huge number of students about their fees. And to back up my points, if Matthew, you can tell me how many students who didn't pay the fee and still go to the WUSA events from any of your previous events, if you have a data on your hand, you said like 25% students do that. I'm totally okay with a mandatory fee. But now you are saying that like you are only say a few hundred or few people do that. That is not very convincing. And for your advocacy point, I understand that WUSA did a lot. You and the previous executive teams do a lot. For example, you told me like you guys do for the student emergency benefits fund. I'm wondering that, do you do that or you just take the credit for that? Also for the immigration thing you told me yesterday, I also read the news. Yes, it's the requirement for immigration is. Thank you. Then earlier, do you do that or you just take the credit? Take the credit. I have a question mark there. Okay, thank you.
Back to Matthew.
All right. Hope we don't go. Hope I can have a chance to answer everyone's questions, but these are also very good questions. So I think I'll try to address them in reverse order. So number one, on like different successes in different programs, WUSA doesn't take credit for anything we didn't do. When it comes to like that student relief fund, that was initiated by WUSA, and WUSA put in what little savings we had available for that kind of thing to support students through the difficult time of the pandemic. And then the university hopped on our back and actually took credit for it. So it happened in the reverse order of sort of your suggestion there. That was WUSA's start from the beginning, and we primarily funded it at the start. And when it comes to the other things that WUSA did in terms of advocacy and supporting students, I can give you some examples if you like. The GRT was aiming, and by contract, they're allowed to charge students wherever they were in the world student fees for the UPass, about $100 a term throughout the pandemic. It was WUSA's advocacy, WUSA's government advocacy that was able to force GRT through the Waterloo City Council to negotiate with us and suspend the UPass so we weren't charging students $100 a term for that. Another item I can talk to is the recreation fee, the sports and recreation fee. I can't recall the exact name. That was something that university wanted to charge every term, but for more than one term in this pandemic, I believe, we've been able to get that fee not assessed. That's over $100 as well of money that funds like varsity teams and the gym, things that students broadly could not access. To talk to the other thing, which you talked about, which is WUSA opt-outs, which is a very important question. I can only give you a rough number of how many people came that opted out because, as I said, we can't afford to collect data. We can't afford to police every event, and that's the core of the problem. We can't even get the data we need to make proper decisions without having the funding to do so, and we can't improve our offerings without having the funding to do so. The money and the buck starts and stops with students because they are the owners of this organization. I can say that back when we had in-person events, because I don't think that COVID times and COVID events is a representative sample of what students value and don't value, I can say we had, for example, at Welcome Week, a very common event and event that students broadly really like, hundreds of students opted in, many hundreds, and that was across different events. I can't give you more specific numbers because the Student Choice Initiative has hampered WUSA's ability to have this kind of information. that fault doesn't lie with WUSA. That fault lies with optional fees and the extreme costs that it puts on administering programs. It's a huge waste of money for us to spend student money on collecting that data right now.
Thank you, Matthew. So next is Catherine.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess.
Catherine,
Oh,
second. Ben, would you mind reacting to everyone who's asking for speaking turn so I know who you're recognizing rather than just me putting everyone's name in there?
Oh, sorry, say that again, Cannon.
Could you, like, if someone's requesting to speak, could you mind like giving a thumbs up to their comment or something so I know you're actually recognizing them to speak?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that. Can I ask, like, for Jay sponsoring Abhiraj, you've written in the thing that you will?
I already sponsored Abhiraj before Jay said it. Okay,
so then it's just the direct responses here from Catherine and Steph, which I recognize. Okay, so Catherine, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to address a couple other things that Jay mentioned. Similar, I guess, to what Matthew was saying about the data that you're asking for. Another big part of why we don't have that data is because we've made an explicit effort not to police access to our services and clubs and events over the pandemic, because we understand the value that it offers to students. We haven't been policing access. We haven't been asking for students to prove that they've paid the events fee because we know that it offers so much value to students, and we don't have the resources to do that policing. We don't want to have to do that policing. And in addition, last spring term, spring 2020, WUSA actually did not levy any of the clubs or events fees. Those were already optional, but we did not charge them to any student because we understood that we were still taking time to figure out what those services and offerings would look like. We do our best to do good by our members because WUSA is its members, quite literally. We're a student union. So we do our utmost best to not charge people for anything that they don't need or haven't asked for. Services and clubs and events are what students have asked for, and that's why we provide them. If you genuinely believe that students don't want it, that's internal change that you can move to make. But right now, students have mandated that we offer these services. And regardless of whether we have funding or not, we will keep trying to offer them, and they can't improve without funding. We will keep offering all of the services and clubs and student life that we have until somebody tells us that they don't want it anymore, because that is what students have told us our purpose is. So I really ask that you consider that when you're voting on this motion and speaking to constituents about what this motion actually means. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. So next, Cannon, you have in the document Edward, but I thought it was Steph to speak next.
My bad. I will change that.
Steph, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to address Jay's question with regards to whether or not we're taking credit for advocacy wins that the government has done. I just wanted to reaffirm that there's surprisingly a number of things that have only been drawn to the federal or provincial government's attention due to us. Unbeknownst to most, and this is something that I'm honestly really proud of, but like as disengaged as Waterloo can seem at times, we're actually a huge powerhouse in advocacy for students within Canada, probably second or on par with like the other major one, which is Western. And governments don't usually think about students that much. They don't think they vote. They don't invest a lot in kind of research on what our needs are. And a lot of that, getting that on their attention involves lobbying, involves doing that research, involves creating policies and coming up with programs that genuinely it's in our best interest when the government thinks something that we wrote and then take credit for it. Like, we're providing them the tools and resources in order to do that. And there are so many issues in government in the way that they're administered that have only been caught because of us. There's a huge one kind of flowing down the pipeline right now with regards to how much the provincial government has spent on OSAP. They spent 400 million less this year on OSAP, despite us being within a global pandemic. That is extremely sketchy, extremely questionable, and that's something that Waterloo in specific, not the other universities, us caught. So, you know, also with regards to, I guess, like international students too, like they're not citizens, they don't get a vote. The government usually doesn't have to act in their best interest, but for us, we stand for all students. So like we stand in solidarity with our international students generally and try and create policies that benefit them as well. And that's a major way in which international students are advocated for within Canada. So yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, reaffirm that like there's a lot we do, and I know that it's not always the most visible thing, and that's something that we're working on, but like trust me on this, it's sometimes mind-blowing the impact that one individual can kind of have.
Thanks, Steph. So next is Cannon.
I just want to directly respond to what kind of advocacy has WUSA done, which was like, do we just take credit for different things? I think it was this year's provincial budget, which is giving more funding for various sexual violence to improve the sexual violence issues in campus, because WUSA, working with our Ontario Undergraduate Student Association, wrote an entire policy paper and advocated for that at provincial and federal level. And we succeeded at that. Similar to that, we have been over, I think it was 2 years ago, when some of the at-large international math students rose issues saying that if they're in co-op, for some reason they're paying more than other co-op people from the weird way that university has their tuition financial system set up. And WUSA and some WUSA executives at that time and some of the math counselors at that time met university admin and got them to change that stuff and fix it, even though that costed university millions of dollars, because that was students. And if WUSA was not here, then international students would still be paying way more than what they are paying right now. So I think this is kind of unfair to say that WUSA just takes credit for advocacy issues where we actually work, especially like I've worked with 3 VPEds and all of them have worked sometimes 60 to 70 hours a week, while they're only paid for 35 hours because they actually care for students and are here to do the best for them. That's all I have to speak.
Thanks, Cannon. So Jay will be the last direct response in this thread, and then we'll go to Rebecca for her first speaking turn.
Okay, thank you. I want to direct response Catherine point. I'm not here to say like every student, every Waterloo student doesn't want the service. I'm saying that 50% of students doesn't want the service. You can find this data on page 115 again. It's clear, so like nearly 48%, 49%, 50% students do not want the service. I'm not here to say that like strike everything down. That is not my intention. And my intention is to keep this optional as students who still want to do the events or clubs. Okay, you can pay the fee, then you can do the events. If you don't want to do it, don't do that. And to back up, you said like you don't want to spend money to identifying students whether or not he pays a fee or not. In yesterday's meeting, I remember Matthew said like he did some sampling, and if he can share the data with us, it would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. So that brings us to Rebecca for a 4-minute speaking turn.
Thank you. So I'm first going to share some of the feedback that we got from a constituent, and I'm just going to quote them directly to obviously not misinterpret anything. So they said that having optional fees is important for transparency and ensuring that programs being funded remain effective and representative of what the student body wants. And students should have a choice in which programs they feel are important and want to support. So kind of further going off of this, I would like to also address some of the points that have been brought up. I don't think that it's in question whether WUSA has really amazing advocacy initiatives or whether WUSA is essential. I think we can all agree that that is a fact, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the WUSA fee should be mandatory for students. And this also relates to one of the ideas that has been brought up as a rationale for having the fee be mandatory, and that WUSA does not want to police events or to like keep track of who's participating in the events. But this is an issue that every single sub-society on campus is also experiencing. Every single sub-society has fees, and they do advocacy initiatives, and they run events, and they still have to try to make sure that the people who actually show up to the events are those that also paid their fee. Another point that was brought up is that by virtue of voting and participating in elections with WUSA, that students are also consenting to the use of their money ultimately if this fee became mandatory. But I don't think that's the case. First of all, because not every student participates in the elections, but every student would be forced to pay this fee if it became mandatory. And also because it's not the same thing. You're electing someone based on their platform, but your fee is being used for something more practical that might change down the line that doesn't necessarily align with the platform with which people are running.
Sorry to interrupt, Rebecca. There's a point of order from Vicky. You'll be given extra time. Vicky, what's up?
Are we just going, I feel like we're going in circles with this in some ways, and I don't know if that's very helpful for the nature of council. I'm just...
I think that, I mean, we're at new speaking turns. I think that this is like sufficient, like these are new points, so this can continue. So you have 2 minutes remaining, Rebecca, sorry.
There's no problem. My other points are really just questions. So I was wondering, you guys provided a pretty solid rationale for why you think the student life fee should be mandatory. Whether or not I agree with the rationale, it was very in-depth. But for the other ones, and the advocacy fee, but for the other ones, I'm wondering why they were chosen, specifically the orientation fee, which by my understanding has always remained optional up until this point. And then I was wondering what fees remain optional if we make these mandatory. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Mike, I will recognize you as an officer, I guess.
Sorry. I believe orientation is only on there for the fee amount. I think it is the system that it works as is staying the same, and I think student refugee as well, unless there was a plan to make those mandatory. I believe those ones are not changing in their system of how they're optional.
Great, thank you, Mike. So next is Matthew.
Hi, I hope I can answer some of these questions. Again, if I don't get them all, ask me again and I'll have a bit more speaking time. So number one, right off the bat, no, orientation will not be mandatory and it will be only assessed to first years, just like normal. And just like the student refugee program, Michael was exactly right. That stuff is all within the enclosed doc that has a lot more details about how things work. And it's important reading for understanding this motion. And on the policing events item that you brought up, it's not just that Waterloo or WUSA doesn't want to police events. That is a perspective because we want to improve student life, and we don't think that improving student life is going to happen when we have giant fences and bomb bouncers at the front of events. But it's that we can't. We do not have the resources to police our clubs. Flat out, 100%, there is no way that we can accurately and reliably, without spending hundreds of staff hours, spending huge amounts of student money, make sure that everyone that is involved in a club has paid their fee. It is absolutely just impossible. I wish it was possible, but it's not. And that's why it has to be made mandatory. It suffers from the same free rider problem as advocacy because of the scale of it. It means that we have to pick between two bad options and the lesser of two evils, which is a mandatory fee. Otherwise, we're faced with having to reduce the amount of support that we give clubs, especially niche clubs that provide really important services to small but meaningful segments of our campus, like cultural clubs that cater to specific international students. These things are invaluable, but they aren't always big enough, and they're at risk of losing services. The future of what that looks like is unknown, because these kind of things are very important. And broadly, WUSA can't offer its level of service with the fee amounts as shown, but with them being optional. Those fees would have to go up because WUSA, although for the purpose of these fees, it looks like they're all in like, very easy silos. This costs this cost in WUSA easily fits into student life, and this cost easily fits in advocacy. But it's all a really big interconnected web, and we had to break it down really for the purpose of making a fee. So when one fee goes optional, other fees might have to go up, and that fee that was made optional might also have to go up, reducing any of the savings and making it more expensive for students. These amounts and them being optional are very specifically designed because that's how they work best. And it takes a lot of work to try to figure out how to do that better, or how to do it with optional while still having to charge students more, because there's no perfect answer here. And on the other issue of voting, every student has the right to vote. If you don't vote, then I'm afraid that that's on you. I know that my team, when we ran unopposed, that's true, but we still had a yes or no vote. And we put as much resources as we could into advertising. We spent money on ads to push our platform out to as many students as possible, so students would be informed on who we are, what our backgrounds are, and how we are likely to act when we're faced with issues like this that are not necessarily wholly foreseen, can't necessarily be stuck on a platform, but that we have to deal with when they come up. We spread our platform as far as we could.
Sorry, I gave you a warning, but I was muted. I apologize. Sorry. Okay. So next is Edward. And also, can you please mute yourself, Matthew?
Oh, of course.
All right. I just want to address some of the points and my alternative perspectives on some of the things, Rebecca, you brought up. So thank you for speaking. I think you made a really good point about the societies having some issues with policing events and judging who has already paid fees. And for that reason, I know that NSUC, we've also recently moved back towards a refundable fee model where fees will be automatically charged, because those issues are causing issues for our society, to point that we as a society have made that decision at our last general meeting that we want to have a more effective society that can do good things for students without having to worry about administration and dealing with all the policing of events. So that's a good point. The second thing I want to bring up is regarding fees and control, and the fact that how students who don't participate in elections or in the governance process don't have a say in where their fee goes. I mean, I think Matthew has brought up good points about how that is partially on the students to engage, and it's also on us as counselors to engage with students and get what they want the organization to do. So these mechanisms are in place for students to have a say. And I think the other issue comes with the opt-out fees is that right now, any student who has opted in or opted out has an equal say in how WUSA is operated. So anyone in this room, you could have opted out and had paid less than everyone else, but you exert the same amount of influence and control as someone who's paid the full complement of fees. And that in of itself, I think, has issues, and along with the free rider issue, where you have people who have contributed less monetarily to the organization having an outsized influence on what everyone else's money who's paid fully going towards. So it's not a perfect system, but I think having the mandatory system definitely has more positives that outweigh the drawbacks.
Thanks, Edward. So I think that exhausts the direct responses to Rebecca. So that brings us to Mary, who is sponsoring Chen. So this is a 4-minute speaking turn.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to start off by saying that I hold a stance that is neither for nor against the issue on the table, but I believe that there are issues with the way this mandatory versus optional fees are currently being decided, and as such, I would like to propose a referendum on the issue. So I think that we can all agree that mandatory versus optional fees are a major issue, right? We've seen that from all the emails to Vincent, from all the debate that's gone on so far, there are very good points on both sides. But I don't believe that this is the correct avenue to make this decision in. First of all, the counselors, the students here are very passionate, very engaged about student government and WUSA. And that's very admirable. I thank you for all being here and making stuff happen. At the same time, though, we're also the people who receive remuneration and compensation from those fees at times. And the strong involvement and connection means that I don't think it's possible to approach this issue without some bias for wanting a certain stability to WUSA. We've talked a lot about democracy and how students are able to vote on what they want to be heard. And I don't believe that this issue has been brought to the student body. I did not receive any emails as a fee-paying WUSA member about this issue. I heard about it from word of mouth last night, less than 24 hours ago at an informal event. And I just don't think that there have been enough outreach in order to inform students about this issue. And a referendum will allow us to do that. I imagine that you all have some great feasibility concerns. I've been informed by an email that the university wants a deadline or a decision on mandatory versus optional fees by Monday, tomorrow. I don't think that feasibility issues should be a concern when it comes to getting what students want on this decision. We can hold a referendum later. We can work something out with the university, say that we need a bit more time for this decision. But if it's a matter of hearing the voices of students, then I think that that's what we need to do. Yeah, as Matthew said earlier, students are the real owners of WUSA, a democracy where people can vote with their actual vote. It's not easy, but I think we need to do a better job of reaching out and getting that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chen. There is a point of inquiry from Jay.
Yes, I have two questions. First of all, please confirm that, as Chen says, the deadline to submit fee is by Monday. The second point is, is it possible? Sorry, the second point is it possible to submit amendment at the moment?
Sorry, what was the second question? I didn't hear.
Sorry, is it possible to submit an amendment for motion 7.5 at this moment?
You can't make an amendment out of a point of inquiry. You can request to speak and have an amendment when you get to your speaking turn.
Can I do that?
When you, if you request a speaking turn, when it gets to your turn, you can propose an amendment. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. To the first question, the Board of Governors of the university meets on the 1st of June. So I don't know that the deadline is tomorrow, but it's certainly like this week. What I will say is like there is maybe for information, like there is precedent for like student decisions to bind future students, right? Like for example, we pay a health services fee that was decided by a referendum by students like decades ago. Students, as soon as the Student Life Center opens, we will start to be assessed a Student Life Center fee, which was decided upon by students in like 2015. So there, and our bylaws empower us to charge fees on a compulsory basis. So it's like there is, I guess there is justification for it to be done. I'm just providing that for information, I guess. So I think that the next is Cannon with a direct response.
I just wanted to respond, Chen. You raised some points, and some of them were valuable points, is that students should have a say in how things are done. and how you didn't know about this was going to happen before from an otherwise, and you only came to know about it last night by an informal event. Every student is allowed to join the council meeting list where the agenda of the meeting is emailed to everyone who's on that list. No one is stopped from subscribing to the list, so that is one way to get that. I don't think it's fair for WUSA to send an email to every student for every meeting, because I've heard from other people saying they don't want that many emails from WUSA. In terms of saying a referendum, this is a general question and to this motion on Reddit, on Instagram polls. My question to council is, how many of those people do you think have actually read the entire fee review report and understand the intricacies of what would happen if this motion passes, if it fails? As we are a representative democracy, if people elect us to actually read through all of that stuff and vote in a way that we think is best for the students. Otherwise, we could have a referendum on every single thing. Like, if you want to give everyone a vote, let's do a referendum on every single item on the agenda. But that's not how things work, because it's not easy for every single student to make an informed decision on every single item. No, I don't think anyone read the 50 pages housing report over other than like a few counselors, because people will not read it and they cannot make informed decisions about these things. So I think referenda is the wrong move to make here, because it's not easy to explain the complications of what would happen if X happens, what happens if Y happens, unless you're actually reading an entire proposal. That students is going to go through the entire proposal and make an informed decision. Not, I would be correct to say not any, but like at least most of them would not do that. That's all I have to say on this.
Thanks, Cannon. So the next two speaking turns are to Jay. Jay, before you speak, like these are your two remaining turns for debate. For this turn. So if you sponsor Chen to directly respond and you respond yourself, then you will not be you will have exhausted your speaking turns. And I understand you intend to propose an amendment. So I guess be cognizant of that.
Okay, I will let.
Okay, but I would welcome a counselor to sponsor Chen to directly respond.
Yes.
Okay,
sorry,
Rebecca does.
So what's happening right now?
Okay, so now it's Jay speaking his own turn.
I partially agree with Ken's opinion. Like, with WUSA doesn't do very good to inform students for this information. This is a very important financial decision. Like Ken said, like we don't need to inform every motion to students, but this one is very important. It's about money. I know it's only like about like $20 or $10, but students have the right to know the entire story before they vote, and we did a very poor job on that. Even I did a survey on my Instagram, but I did not inform my constituents with a full story. Therefore, I would like to bring an amendment to motion 7.5 that be it resolved that the student council ratifies the following. The student council remains status quo for the fee model for fall 2022 and immediately start a referendum for this issue by providing full story to every Waterloo undergraduate student and let students to decide this motion, and in order to show democracy or the WUSA achievements.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor. Michael, did you get the text of that amendment?
I did not fully. I can write. I got the gist of it. I can type it up unless Jay, you have something and want to put it in the chat.
Sure.
Okay, there's a point of order from Vincent.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm just literally in the car on the way to get my vaccine. I request a ruling from the speaker on if the proposed amendment would be in line with our bylaws, policies, procedures, etc.
So I'm going to need to see text of the amendment before I can make a ruling. What I will say is that the bylaws empower Students' Council to ratify fee changes. I can pull up the article. So it definitely would be unusual to have changes to the fees be ratified by a referendum. I mean, council is empowered to call a referendum. So I'll wait to see the text of the amendment. Okay, so be it resolved that WUSA Council remains the current fee model until a referendum takes in place by providing students with full stories. Is there a second to that amendment? Okay, I hear no second. So the amendment does not reach the floor. So I will not make a ruling on if it's in order. So we remain on the motion as presented on the agenda. Oh, sorry. I have this. So that brings us to Rebecca, who is sponsoring Chen for a direct response. So this is a 2-minute speaking turn.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to address Cannon's points on sending emails and holding referendums and this motion not being important enough to do that. I'll note that at the start of spring 2021, there was an email sent which talked about committee elections happening in this meeting now. So if committee elections are important enough to be listed in emails, I believe that this fee structure change is as well. So you also talked about in the referendum that the majority of students, or that students participating in a referendum, are uninformed or uneducated. Is it your place to make that judgment? Is it our place to make that judgment in the Students' Council that the students are insufficiently informed to make a good decision on this? And because that's how democracy works. If it takes us needing to inform the students, then we should do that. Yeah.
Thanks, Chen. So there's a point of inquiry from Vicky.
Hello, if I'm not mistaken, isn't WUSA only allowed to send so many emails to students? Or at least per term more of information? I believe that's what I was told before.
Yeah, I can speak to, so I sent that email in which I referred to, I invited students to come to this meeting to be elected to committees in a beginning of term welcome email that WUSA presidents traditionally send, which was, I guess it was, I was presented with an opportunity to send an email to, like 35,000 people. And I thought that would be, I guess, I mean, I think we're all on the same page in this meeting where like we are, passionate about student government and we're interested in these sorts of things. And I thought that would be a good thing to raise, especially relating to my role as like the sort of head of student government. I know that Matthew also sent like a beginning of term email on fees more specifically. But that is right, Vicky, that we do have limited access to the mailing list from the registrar's office. So I hope that answers your point of inquiry. So we go next to Edward.
Yeah, I want to respond to what Chen is saying, and I think you made some good points about how we judge importance, and that's a ongoing discussion about how we use the resources we have. This is an important issue because we've had almost an hour on discussion on this. I think the fact that we are all here and that you are here and that people are hearing about this and we've had this discussion, I think it does demonstrate, though, that this representation system is working. We are engaging with students. We have heard student voices throughout this conversation. We've heard from at-large members. We've heard through our emails what students are thinking. So I think it's difficult to say that the process isn't working when clearly it is working, otherwise we wouldn't be here right now. Is it working at 100% efficiency? No, it's formed by a bunch of volunteer counselors who are doing their best, who won't always be at their 100% effectiveness, but I think as a collective, we're all doing our best to reach out to students, to get their opinions. I know I've had students reach out to me by email. I've had conversations with students on our Engineering Society Discord. I've had conversations with other students from other faculties. I think we're all doing the best effort to reach out to students and meet with them within the constraints we have, which is that we're all working, or students, full-time. This is not our full-time job to go out and collect students' opinions. We are doing the best we can with the time we have in a week to read the agendas, go out and talk to students. Is there room for improvement? Yes, I think you are right to point out that we could have reached out to people earlier and had gotten earlier feedback and having to hear about it late last night. That said, the fact that it happened, I don't think it's a condemnation of the system. I think it is emphasizing the system is working as intended.
Thank you, Edward. So next is Matthew, but Matthew, I'll advise you, this will be your fourth subsequent turn. You withdraw?
Yeah, the other speakers have covered a lot of very great context.
Okay. So that brings us to Cannon.
I'm going to make a few comments. Chen, we are a representative democracy. That literally means we are here to make decisions because people think we are capable to make decisions in the best interest of them. I'm not saying everyone is incompetent or uneducated, but I'm saying a majority of people might not put the effort into actually learning what they're doing, because unless they know the intricacies of WUSA and how we as an organization work, we can try to explain it to people, but we really can't, because no matter how much paper you give to a person, unless they actually read and understand it fully, they cannot make informed decisions. Your entire argument says that everyone should get one vote, but that's not how representative democracy works, as I've mentioned before. And secondly, this was a point which I wanted to counter before. You said, we're all here getting some kind of remuneration, so we have a bias. Except for the execs, none of the counselors here are actually getting paid. We're all volunteers who spend about 10 to sometimes 20, for some people it's 30 hours a month helping WUSA, because we actually care for students and want to make this university a better space for students. We're not here to earn money. None of us get any money like that. That's all I had to say, Speaker, and I am also gonna call the question now.
The call to question is not in order because it has to be the first thing you say. You can't have the last word and then call a question. So we will go to Angela.
Hi, I'm not gonna talk too much because so much has already been mentioned. I don't want to get too circular, but overall, I just did want to mention that from an engineering counselor's perspective, I did receive 3 emails against and 2 emails for, and those people who are against it, one actually noted the fact that they believe that the Student Choice Initiative was actually really important and a good step for students themselves. Whereas, for example, the people on the for side, one of them said that they understand how lack of funding really, I guess, decreases the quality of the services that WUSA can provide, especially in terms of things like the food bank that was mentioned. So there definitely has been mixed response, even as I've talked to some of my friends in my program, there has been a mixed response. But I do think that obviously, as I am on council, I do have some type of bias because I do believe that all of the services that are provided are extremely important. But at the same time, though I am conscious of this bias, I must agree that a lot of the things that have been said previously in terms of really explaining a lot of the misinformation and answering a lot of the questions is extremely important. I think that there's been a lot of, I guess, like maybe I wouldn't say necessarily a lack of communication, because like it was said before, there's communication. It's just a lot of students don't necessarily seek it, which is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I do believe that a lot of the students here in WUSA, we do have the capability of understanding, because we have to. It's part of our role. We have to learn about all of these things and make sure that we are informed when we are making these decisions. And though I agree that important decisions like these should have the input of students as a whole, I do see where you're coming from in that point. And it also does come with the point of like Shannon said, you have to be able to provide all of that information to the students. And are the students going to be responsible enough to go through, read all that, make all the decisions, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to repeat too much, but yeah, just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. So there's a point of inquiry from Connor.
In the message 7.5, it says the changes will be as of FY 2022. FY, does that mean fiscal year starting in September or starting in January 2022?
Our fiscal year runs from, so it's the fiscal year ending in 2022, which is the present fiscal year started on May 1st. It will end April 30th, 2022. So that's this fiscal year.
If I can provide just a little bit more context for that, our fiscal year runs from May 1st to April 30th. But when we are talking about fees, because we work with the university system, any fees that are implemented for fiscal year 2022 come into effect in the September fall term of year 2021.
All right, thank you, Matthew, for the clarification. There's a point of privilege from Vincent.
Hello?
Yep.
I have to leave and go get my vaccine. Can I register my vote as in favor if the voting is taking place while I'm in the middle of my medical appointment?
Unfortunately, I've said to other members that voting by proxy is not permissible. So it would be unfair.
Is this a proxy if I'm just declaring my vote a priori? Does this count as a proxy situation?
I'll welcome any advice from the assembly on this if they think it's acceptable or not. So anybody feel free to contribute. Jay?
I think if you let like Vincent vote, then probably let everyone who left vote.
Right.
Have any counselors left the meeting?
I know that there are absent counselors.
Yeah.
I would say in the case of Vincent, like he's been engaging and he's been here for the majority of the meeting, and to get his shot will probably take 10 to 15 minutes where he can't access his phone. So, I mean, he didn't know when this particular item would come up. So I view it as a little bit different versus the folks who couldn't attend or had to step away for a longer sort of period of time. Like he's clearly trying his best to be able to sort of engage here. One compromise I would say is just, I don't know, when we do the voting, just take an extra long time and like voting, like at the period of which like it's open for.
Okay, there's a direct response from Connor.
Also, I just wanted to raise the point that it is 11 minutes past the end meeting's time, so I believe it would still be unfair to exclude his vote, since this should have happened within scheduled meeting times. And if his vaccine appointment is outside meeting times, then it definitely makes sense that he should be included as a part of the vote.
Okay, Catherine, Catherine, and saw Catherine.
Hey. Connor covered my point. I just typed in chat scratch. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we okay, Jay.
I think if Vincent can just like stay in the chat, not in the phone, by casting his vote when we are in the voting procedure.
Like I can certainly try, but I don't know that I'll be
remain.
able to.
Okay.
And also for Connor's, like our adjournment time is 4:30, not 3:30.
The agenda and the meeting invite had different times.
Yeah, that is right. The meeting was 3:30. I apologize. Okay, so it appears that the consensus of the assembly is that Vincent can indicate his vote now. And so long as it's not amended, then we can take it. That's what I'll rule. So Vincent, if you can type in the chat your vote, and so long as the motion is not amended, we will take it. Okay, Cannon has a direct response.
No, sorry, mine is going back to the actual speaking order.
Okay. So after Angela was Matt again.
Hey, Angela, thanks so much for sort of bringing that stuff from your constituents, because that kind of stuff is really important. One thing I wanted to touch upon, because not all of us were around in the SCI time, and not all of us were paying much attention in the SCI time. The Student Choice Initiative was introduced in 2019, and it was billed by the government as giving students choice to support things in their campus that weren't essential to their education and to operations on their campus. And that's how the government promised it. But when the government came out and released exactly what fees were going to be charged, it was very clear to political commenters, the media, and us as students that it was a specific targeted legislation to weaken the ability of students' unions to defend students' interests. For example, the legislation means that students have to pay mandatory fees. They said that students could pay mandatory fees and be required by the University of Waterloo to pay those mandatory fees to support our sports teams. I don't know about you, I don't think paying for Waterloo sports teams is an essential thing, but this legislation felt that it was. Meanwhile, it put our student life, our advocacy, or a huge amount of other services that provide a huge amount of cultural, social, and support benefit to our students all on the chopping block, while also taking away that advocacy stance. Because as we've outlined, WUSA and other student unions are really, really good at advocacy and getting students' interests answered and addressed. So it seems on its surface like something really good for students, but something that a lot of students at the time realized, looking at it, is, oh, this wasn't a good thing for students. It's presented as one, but it isn't. It was a targeted attack on our ability to protect our students, and it was struck down as unconstitutional and illegal, that the government did not have the authority to do this.
Thank you, Matt. So next is Cannon.
Mr. Speaker, I call the question.
Okay, calling the question. So we will vote. Does Mr. Deputy Speaker, does calling the question require 2/3?
Yes.
Okay, and Vicky seconds the call. Seconds calling the question. Okay, so we will. Okay, there's a point of order from Jay.
Can you inform the council what is called for questions?
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. Calling the question is a specific type of motion, which we will vote on whether or not to proceed immediately to the vote on the motion. So if calling the question succeeds, we move immediately to voting on the motion that you see on your screen. If it fails, we'll continue debating. So voting for this is to vote for no more debate, we've talked enough. It requires 2/3 to pass of a quorum of, I don't know if you have those figures ready, Mike.
Okay, thank you for the info.
Thanks, Jay. And there's a point of information from Rebecca.
If like calling the question goes through, is it then possible to like make amendments to the So like, for example, splitting up parts of the motion, or would that have to be done before?
No, if we call the question, we proceed immediately to the vote as it, to the motion, to voting on the motion as it exists presently.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so so Cannon has called the question, seconded by Vicky. I will put in the chat, call question. And those in favor will thumbs up, and those opposed will heart react. If you're unable to access the chat for voting, then sorry, I'm just like dissociating here. If what was I even saying? Yeah, you can. Okay, you can put it in the chat and we'll count it. That's what I was trying to say, which people are doing anyway. Okay, Mike, what do you have the quorum, the present quorum, or the voting members present? What's the number?
I don't know dynamically present, like I don't know how many people have left, but throughout the course of the meeting, 27 voting members have been in the meeting. So 2/3 of that would be 9 times 2, 18. If that math is correct. If it needs to be dynamically who is in the meeting right now with voting rights, I can quickly review my spreadsheet.
I see presently there are 18 votes in favor of calling the question to 5 against calling the question. So that satisfies the 2/3 requirement, and the motion to call the question succeeds. Jay would like to be noted in opposition to calling the question. So we have called the question. We will proceed immediately to voting on the ratification of the new WUSA fee model as presented. There is a point of inquiry first, Jay.
Mike said like we have 27 voting number here, and we have 14, 15, 16, 17 for is that 2/3? Can you recount the current voting number, please?
So I see that I made the determination based on the people who have voted. There are 14 thumbs up plus the another 4 people, or another 4 people who are in favor, which makes 18 to 5. So of the votes cast, it satisfies the 2/3 requirement, which I think is what we have to work off of here.
What about the abstention?
Pardon, sorry?
Oh, okay. Mary answered my question. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. So 2/3. So again, we've successfully called the question, and we vote on the ratification of the new WUSA fee model. So I will read the motion that we're about to vote on. Whereas the Board of Directors has approved a return to a mandatory fee model in light of legal challenges to the Student Choice Initiative, then be it resolved that the Students' Council ratify the following changes to the WUSA fees for fiscal year 2022. Student Life, $35, including community building, services, clubs funding, health and safety, and events fees. Academic support and advocacy, $15.39, including academic support, university advocacy, government advocacy fees. Operations, $29.58. Orientation fee, $117.17. Student refugee program, $5.01. Capital program fund, $15.11. be it further resolved that should the Student Choice Initiative come back into force, the WUSA fees return to the existing optional model, existing optional framework, adjusting for increases to the Consumer Price Index. Okay, so we will vote on that motion. I will put in the chat WUSA fees, and it'll be the same thumbs up to in favor. Art is opposed, and the surprise react, or sorry, the laugh react will be to abstain. Okay, I see the present vote count at 17-2. It appears unlikely that the motion will fail. The motion carries. And we have a new WUSA fee model to bring to the Board of Governors. And there's a point of order from Vicky.
I just want to address Sam's comment. Is that in friendly, or is it like, because I know when you went through the rules, like, is that considered attack or not an attack?
I honestly don't really understand like what the comment meant, but I guess I'll just remind all present that the chat is to be used for conducting business, and we'll move on. And I think that Jay wants to be noted noted in opposition to the motion. And Sam, I recognize your comments. It's all good. Okay, next is the ratification of fee adjustments for WUSA staff salaries.
Edward has a POI.
Oh, yes, sorry, Edward.
Yeah, I just want to ask, what rules does council typically operate under for procedure and deciding how to end debate?
The parliamentary authority for the Students' Council is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition. Sorry, I'm going to turn off my my blurry camera so I can flex this book. Whatever, never mind, I'm not going to bother. But so this is the book that says like when motions need to be seconded, like all those sort of intricacies. So it isn't arbitrary, but I am sympathetic to the view that like at your first Students' Council meeting, it does seem a bit arcane. But there are these are the accepted rules by council. Does that satisfy your point of inquiry, Edward?
Yes, thank you, Ben.
Thanks. Okay, so next is the ratification of fee adjustments for WUSA staff salaries, whereas the Board of Directors has approved the 2021 WUSA workforce plan as redacted, then be it resolved that the Students' Council ratify an increase of $5.08 to the operations fee. This is again submitted by Vice President Schwartz, who I will take to move. Is there Cannon seconds. And before, just Matthew wanted to be noted in favor of the last motion. Okay, so Matthew, as the mover, you have speaking rights.
I got to click on both of them. Yes, so this is something that has been in the works for a while, and it was passed through board and approved through board. Broadly, there is these are regular changes, well, not regular changes, but they're not a super extraordinary thing for us to approve workforce increases to better support our operations and our students as we come back to campus and expand our operations. So this is an increase for that increased staffing that's going to provide better services to students and mean that WUSA can operate even better for students.
Thanks, Matthew. Are there any questions? Steph?
Yeah, I just wanted to add for folks' context, part of the reason why the workforce is increasing over the years is because we're seeing a lot more undergraduate students enrolling at the university than before. So to be able to provide those additional supports and to, you know, provide services to like a vastly larger amount of students. That's one of the reasons. The other reason as well is with the PAC SLC expansion, which will hopefully be open very soon. Knock on wood. I can't reach wood. Okay. That there's going to be a lot more services and spaces sort of open, and that we're going to need additional staff to support that as well. So this isn't like out of the blue.
Thanks, Steph. And I'll just add the reason this is considered as a separate motion from the previous fee motion is because the bylaws provide for increases to staff salaries to be considered as like a special case. And because our staff are, we have a co-employment relationship with the University of Waterloo, so staff of WUSA are also staff of the University of Waterloo, and therefore a member of the Waterloo Staff Association, which has something of a collective bargaining agreement with the university. So these are really like we're contractually compelled to make some of these increases anyway. So are there any other questions on this motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. I guess I'll put it in chat again. Operations question mark. Same rules as above. I will copy and paste.
Already did it.
Oh, thank you, Cameron. Okay, I'll wait until 4:01.
And we have a majority right now.
Okay, I was just to be thorough, and I don't believe it'll be over. Yeah, so the motion carries. We have ratified fee adjustments for WUSA staff salaries. Next is an item on incorporating equity into the Enterprise Opportunity and Innovation Fund. Whereas the fiscal year 2021 annual plan included the creation of an equity fund, and whereas the Internal Funding Committee recommends the proposed changes to the Students' Council procedures 15 and 16, then be it resolved that the Students' Council approve amendments to Council procedures 15 and 16 as presented. This is submitted by Vice President Schwartz, and I'll take Steph as the seconder. Matthew has speaker's rights, and then Steph has been added to the speaking list next.
Thank you so much. So this is something, it was a plan, an implementation plan of the previous executives that ended up just taking a little bit longer than their year in office. So that's why I brought it to council now, which is incorporating equity into the Enterprise Opportunity and Investment and Innovation Fund, one of our endowment funds. Steph was actually there when this whole stuff was, when these things were prepared in that committee, IFC. So I'd actually like to ask her to speak mostly to it. She's going to be the best expert we've got here.
Thank you, Matthew. Steph?
Not only me, Angela too was also there if she wants to jump in at any point. But yeah, essentially the previous exec wanted to support sort of equity projects that were ongoing, specifically those that were being run by at-large students. So this thing is less so oriented towards the services. In particular, if you actually read through the amendments that we made to it, we kind of explicitly stated that, this is for, students who aren't super involved in WUSA, but might have ideas on how to, improve equity within our campus and need money in order to support some of those projects. Essentially IFC, as it stands currently, it did have the ability to support equity projects. That's one of the pillars for the Student Life Endowment Fund, which is another endowment fund that IFC administers. But the issue was that in terms of advertising, students weren't really aware that the funds were there for that purpose. A lot of students, when you look at the title and it just says Student Life Endowment Fund and then Enterprise Innovation, and I don't remember the whole thing because someone scrolled away from it. But you read the title, and when we don't explicitly say this money is also here for equity initiatives, then it becomes a lot harder to actually, for students to know that money is there. And a huge thing about endowment funds, I think, by having money that's sort of set aside, letting students know that it's there, encourages them to begin thinking about ways that they can kind of change their student life environments. I know that there's a couple proposals that I've submitted myself to my own faculty endowment fund because I knew that that money was there, and if it's just going to be sitting around, that's not very useful to us. So it got me thinking, and a lot of other students expressed to me when I was chair of that endowment fund that knowing that that money was there, really got them thinking and really enabled them to do projects of this nature. So yeah, that's the reason why we added it. If you look into the actual motion itself, you'll see that there's a breakdown for how much each, I guess the overall percentage of the fund towards each category it's supposed to go into. IFC has the ability to change that around if we just get a lot of proposals that are related to the innovation category that year, or so it can be switched around. That's just like a recommendation that it be divided into the current way that it's being divided into. It's still going to maintain the name of EOI. We've essentially just taken what was covered in Enterprise and expanded the definition so that it incorporates it there, and also Enterprise and Innovation. Very nebulous and similar concepts is what IFC found. So yeah.
Thanks, Steph. Before we go to Cannon, I'm going to recognize Mike with some context.
Sorry, I was looking at the agenda, and the copy in there does not actually have the full description for equity, so I'm just going to put it in the chat now. It is in there on the real document, just like there's a bunch of confusing tracking change issues. The text is in the chat now. That's all I needed to add.
Thank you, Mike. So that said, we will go to Cannon.
I just wanted to clarify, Ben, could you go to page number, 142 of the agenda?
Can you see?
A bit lower. I think that is page 141. I want 142. Yep. I just want to confirm that point 3 is actually not being removed. As like the comment said, we could also just strike this section. I just want to confirm it's not being stricken.
To my knowledge, it's not being stricken. That was not what was communicated to IFC when we approved that. I do admit that tracking changes do make this rather confusing.
Okay, thanks. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Cannon. Next is Edward.
I mean, my main thing was I was going to ask for the corrected copy, but yeah, that's all. It's already been addressed.
Thanks. So that said, I see no further requests to speak. Where are we? Okay. So does anybody oppose the motion as presented? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, this carries unanimously. And congratulations to the IFC people for doing this. Okay, next is a discussion item on health and dental plan for part-time students to consider if part-time students have a similar need for insurance coverage as full-time students and whether a similar opt-out model should be adopted for this group. Submitted by Vice President Schwartz. Is there a second?
Ben, I'll second.
Edward seconds. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you so much. Everybody, I am so sorry that I'm keeping here so late. Please bear with me. So this broadly is here to take a look at our health and dental plan. For context, currently it is only assessed to full-time students. And while I could speak to this, I think it's best that I bring in the person that has, I think, the most knowledge around it. So I would like to sponsor the previous VPOF, Alana, to speak to this item. I believe she's here.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Sorry, that was my doorbell. Yeah, in the entire year, talking with Student Care, and Student Care has their own relationship with the university as well for like our data sharing and opt-outs and all of that. So part-time students do not get charged the health and dental plan automatically. A lot of part-time students do need health and dental. And the way that it currently works is that they are opted into by exception by the VPOF through Student Care. The question at hand is, should we include part-time students because they are still our members, they are full members of USA. They, being part-time or full-time does not negate a need for a health or dental plan. The dental plan can be opted out during our change of coverage period, and the health plan can be opted out of if you have proof of additional coverage to make sure that you have some form of health coverage. The only question that has been raised to me thus far is if the current system works as far as opting people in, why would we change that is the question. And the answer is that everyone that we opt into our plan, everyone that we opt into our plan is technically a negative balance on the health of the fund, because anyone choosing to opt in will be using more in terms of claims than they are paying for the plan. So as far as the health of the fund and what's best for the continuation of the fund and for prices not to be raised for students in the long run is to include part-time students in the group of students that we automatically charge.
Thank you, Elena. I'll just ask that you mute, unless I think you already did. Okay, so we will go to Steph.
Hi, I just want to add on to this that actually I've had a couple of students slide into my DMs specifically asking me questions regarding this, where they're taking like, load, or they at least, okay, so like in my program, it's fairly common for people to take some terms off or to take part-time course loads or to take some, and you would think that you would still have access to student care and whatnot, but then a lot of folks find out that they don't, and like that's happened to myself as well. And then you only find out when you're trying to refill your prescription, and all of a sudden for something that you used to pay like maybe $7 for, it's like $150, and if you don't catch this during the change of coverage period, it gets very difficult to sort of like opt into. And there's currently a student who problems with getting the wisdom teeth removed, which is like an operation that absolutely like needs to happen, because they were in that weird period. I'd also add that like it particularly affects students with disabilities who are prone to taking a reduced course load, and a lot of them have been impacted by this as well. I don't know. I feel like most students need healthcare, and a lot of students are very used to the fact that they're just automatically enrolled into student care. So this would kind of help a lot of the students who may be taking a little bit of an unconventional path to graduating, to ensure that they get that important coverage. And just to add, we have one of the best healthcare plans, best value for money of all universities. So it's a good deal for them.
Thanks, Steph. Matt has a direct response.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce what Steph has to say. Number one, I don't think it's that we have one of the best. I think we have the best. We have a phenomenal healthcare plan. It's the very proud work of a lot of previous VPOFs that need the credit for that. This is something I can speak to very specifically because I'm the point of contact. Me and Mike specifically are the point of contact for students that want to be opted in. I sent an email at the start of the term, which everybody here should have gotten, that told people to check your health and dental to make sure you're getting the coverage you want. Because every year there are students, part-time students, others that sometimes don't even realize that they're part-time students because of how the university counts things, that are not assessed their health and dental fees. And then there's a surprise down the road when they have got to pay for something, and it's a huge exorbitant cost. So it's not students' fault, but it happens very frequently. And for some students, they get in time and we can opt them in. Others, we're having to send unfortunate emails that say, I'm sorry, we can't cover you. You have to eat these costs, because it's just something we cannot do because of the length of time it took them to realize, because of how infrequently they end up having to use it, but they still need it. I very strongly believe that part-time students have the exact same needs for healthcare as full-time students. And if they already have coverage, they can opt out just like everybody else. It doesn't force anything on them, but it gives them the coverage that they need without any surprises.
Thanks, Matthew. For the minutes, Mary and Harleen, the Math SOC designates, well, Math SOC president and then the mathematics designate have left at 4:15. Okay, so that brings us to Vicky.
I guess I wonder, not that I'm against this, just by what definition are you going by part-time students? Because as Steph brought up about disability students. So by OSAP like guidelines, it is 40% with a person with registered disability, but the university, I think it's only 60%, and that's something I do want to somehow address and getting more like more continuality, or just make it more continuous, because OSAP is the one kind of paying the university. So that's a different story though, but yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Vicky. Matthew and Steph have direct responses in that order.
Based on my understanding, and I believe that this is true, part-time students with a registered disability, you're counted full-time, I believe, as according to the university's rules. So that does at least make sure that students with a registered disability are able to take what counts for them as a full-time load and still get their healthcare as it stands. But not all students that are inhibited by things that affect their studies are covered by, been able to get their disability registered and properly evaluated, but still cope and work with the system by taking part-time level of studies. So by having this offered, we ensure that nobody falls through the cracks and has that offering available to them, and they're covered for their healthcare.
Thanks, Matthew. Next to Steph.
Hi, this might have changed in recent years, but 2 springs ago, I was actually in the same scenario. And when I was talking to the center trying to get insurance and UPass and everything like that sorted out, they mentioned that essentially there's a bit, in terms of like data sharing with the university and WUSA, even though a student might be recognized as full-time by the university, we only get to see their course load. We don't get communicated that information of whether or not they are counted as a full-time student by the university. So what ends up happening is that from a registrar end, it will just assume that you are a part-time student and thus as a part-time student. And then in order to you have to go to the VPOF, and thankfully they've never asked me to show them like my health documentation and whatnot. They've taken me at my word, but like the fact that someone has to, not only like go through the accessibility process, thinking that they're covered, but also go to WUSA and like, have to be like, hey, like I'm a student with a disability, please opt me back into things. And it's like this very tedious and frustrating process. So, this would at least help with regards to the health plan aspect of that. UPass is a different story, and that's something that I think Matthew will be like addressing throughout the year, but it is a real pain in the butt from experience.
Thanks, Steph. So next is Vicky.
Yeah, so I know like last spring I only took 2 courses, and on my on my transcript and everything, it only said part-time, even though 2 courses for me would be 40% as a person with disability. So I'm just glad, I guess, now everyone can part-time who is considered by university terms. So I'd be more in favor of this motion.
Thanks, Vicky. For clarity, there is no motion on the floor at present, but I guess that's subject to change. Cannon.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. If a student is already enrolled in the health plan, and then in the middle of the term they drop courses and become part-time students, do they still get their coverage?
Mike looks like he can answer.
It is complicated. So if it is a term that you would have needed to pay, so for a non-co-op student, they have to pay in fall and winter, and they get service fall, winter, spring. If they did not pay for it in the winter, so if they dropped down a course load, or if they were not automatically assessed for one reason or another, they would need to catch that themselves and self-enroll through this separate process, or else they would not be able to have that coverage winter and spring.
Okay, thanks. I guess at that point, I think it is better for our part-time students to be able to get these benefits to you, because it is difficult to figure out how administration works sometime of different things.
Thanks, Cannon and Mike. Next is Matthew.
All right, then. I brought this item forward just to get a bit of a temperature check on council and their thoughts on this. So I'm very comfortable making a motion now. So I'd like to say that if it doesn't mind, if I can just say it out loud. Whereas students who are part-time for whatever reason have similar healthcare needs to that of full-time students, be it resolved that Students' Council endorses extending student care healthcare coverage to part-time students under the same structure as full-time students. It's off the cuff, so if someone wants to improve the wording, go right ahead.
Vicky has seconded. Mike, did you get the motion text? Fine.
I'm typing up the second half of it. 1 sec.
Okay. I'm just going to wait for Mike to get the motion text, and then I'll take your point of order, Edward. Okay. That looks good to me. Now, Edward, point of order.
So would the effect of this motion be to automatically enroll all part-time students into this plan on an opt-out basis?
I don't know what that beep was, but oh well. My intent here is, I'm not sure if anyone else's system is beeping like mine is, but I think I'm just gonna mute somebody here. Oh, there you go. Mike beat me to it. So I was told sort of by my predecessor that we could motion forward to give myself the mandate to pursue this in whatever way it has to be pursued. And this is something that should be amenable to UW Finance and student care. If there's a detail I wasn't aware of, would very much appreciate it coming forward, though.
Okay. I guess some context for why I brought this up is I know for UPass and part-time, we had to do that by referendum. So I'm just curious from around what powers council has to do this.
Alana, if you're still here, do you know if the nature of this?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but the point of the motion was to fully give Matthew permission to spend his time and resources to formulate the appropriate plan to do that.
Yeah, that was my goal with it broadly. I don't think that requires a referendum mandate.
Okay, Edward.
Then I move an amendment to clarify the wording so that whereas students who are registered as part-time for whatever reason, be it resolved that the VPOF carries out a plan to, be it resolved that the BPOF researches and creates a plan to integrate part-time students into the healthcare plan.
And then be it further resolved that part-time students be assessed the health and dental plan fees in the same structure as is assessed to full-time students currently?
No, I'm striking that part that actually implements. I'm just keeping the mandate that allows Matt to work on this and spend time building it out, but not putting it into effect.
Okay. Is there a second for that amendment?
I'll second it.
Oh, well, okay. You can take it, Vicky, as long as you consent, then we can take it as a friendly amendment. We don't need to vote. So are you okay with the language that Edward just said?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that's a friendly amendment. And it reads as Edward said. Do you have that, Mike? I mean, it's basically tasking you, so the language isn't super important, but.
Yeah, I think that's what my original wording was that Students Council endorses me doing that, but no fault to Mike. I tend to talk fast, especially at this point in the meeting. Cool. So thanks so much for support, and I'm all good.
Okay, so now we have a direct response from Cannon.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring a point that the responsibility of actually approving adding part-time staff needs to go through the Health Plan Oversight Committee, I believe, because they are the board in a way, because they are the people who are in charge of this under board procedure.
Okay, thanks, Cannon. So having exhausted the speaking list, we will take the motion as friendly amended to a vote. Mike, do you mind reading the motion text?
Whereas students who are registered as part-time for whatever reason, be it resolved that the VPOF researches and creates a plan to integrate these students into the health and dental plan.
I think that you're missing like a second clause to the first sentence where whereas students who are registered as part-time for whatever reason have the same healthcare needs as full-time students. And I will take that as the consensus of the assembly that that's friendly. So whereas students who are registered as part-time for whatever reason have the same healthcare needs as full-time students, be resolved that the VPOF research proposal to whatever, follow up, investigate, whatever. The second part was the same as what Mike said, but so does anybody oppose the motion? Does anybody wish to abstain? Okay, hearing neither, this carries unanimously. And Matt has more work to do. So next we'll move to an item on return to campus and vaccination requirements to discuss safety in the return to campus, including a stance on vaccination requirements for participation in on-campus activities. If I can I take that as a second?
Yeah, that was a second, and then I want to speak also before Matt
speaks. I guess I'll speak to the context. We've been contacted, we, the execs, have been contacted by a couple of news outlets asking if we support mandatory vaccination for students returning to campus. And I guess it's sort of an open question. It's, I guess, kind of controversial, but I guess what I'll say is I was initially not super opposed to it, but I will say that from what I've heard from talking to the university administration, this seems incredibly unlikely to happen. So it may not even really warrant discussion unless council says, yes, we want to advocate to the university to make vaccines a requirement for participating in on-campus activities. But I'll just say that the university's kind of view on this is kind of aligned with public health guidelines, where it's they would rather people take the vaccine out of their own volition than be forced to, and they think that that's it's better to echo the public health messaging that is already going on. And I know in addition to my conversations with administrators, Catherine attended the president's town hall where this kind of came up, and it appears like the university is not going to bite on this. So I guess keep that in mind. So welcome any thoughts on that or any discussions on concerns about returning to campus safety kind of more generally. So we'll go to Cannon.
Ben, I'm going to motion to...
There's a direct response from Connor. Sorry to interrupt you.
I just have a question just to kind of like go off of your point. So like it says that like our stance on vaccination requirements, how would we track those vaccination requirements?
I mean, that's a good question, right? It would,
Yeah, exactly.
for the purposes of this discussion, we might have a resolution like be it resolved that WUSA believes that all students should require vaccines, and then that would be just like we tell the university like, hey, this is what students want. But I mean, that's a very good question, and you know, it's hard to. The thing is, like everywhere in the world is kind of going through these questions right now too. So I just wanted to get on it early, I guess. So don't really have a satisfactory answer because I don't know. Steph?
Yeah, I would say provide some clarification. I guess what is mostly trying to achieve by like putting this forward is that we, the exec, when media or the university contact us about that, we feel as if there's a lot of nuance in there where we don't feel as if we can, you know, say anything on this matter and speak on behalf of students. So now we're currently left to say like no comment, or WUSA does not have a stance on this. And or I guess trying to do like a temperature check of whether or not students, I don't know, feel strongly enough either way to, you know, want us to give a specific stance on this. Otherwise, we're just going to say like, you do you. And if that's what you would like us to do, that's also fine as well.
Thanks, Steph. So then next is Cannon.
Motion to extend the meeting time by 15 minutes because we are finished. We have reached the adjournment time.
Okay. Is there a second? Vicky seconds. Does anybody oppose extending the meeting? Does anybody wish to abstain? So that carries, and we will move our adjournment to 4:45. Connor opposes. Fighting the good fight, Connor. Okay. Okay, so that brings us to Vincent.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I did ask a few constituents about this, and the temperature check I was getting is people seem to be, I guess kind of leaning in favor, but they have concerns about, implementation and how that would work with, international students who might not have been eligible as early as people in Canada were. I can tell you I got my vaccine like half an hour ago, and my second dose is scheduled for September 5th, so around when classes start. So it's looking like, second doses might not happen until around the first month of classes. So I don't think we'd be able to, feasibly mandate vaccinations for September, but maybe it would be possible to say if you're not vaccinated by like October or November, then at that point maybe make it required, but then you're in the middle of a term. So yeah, it seems like people aren't really necessarily opposed to this. They do have some concerns about like legality and ethics, but I imagine the university would check it's legal before they mandated it. But I don't really see if this can very feasibly be implemented. I would say WUSA should probably just go along with whatever the university does. Like, I don't think this is something that we should necessarily be spending major resources advocating for or against.
Thanks, Vincent. So a couple of things. Angad from Softs has left, and apparently Abby's left at 4:35. There's a point of privilege from Connor.
I just wanted to ask if we could have a 5-minute washroom break, as I've been like very exhausted and I really need to go to the washroom. I don't know.
I might suggest, we're so close to adjourning, I will excuse you to go to the bathroom, if that works.
Okay,
I'm a teacher now, by the way. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so okay, so that was Vincent. Then Steph had a direct response. Connor did too, but he's gone to the bathroom. So Steph.
I did?
Well, there was a 2 in the chat.
Oh, no, that was from earlier.
Oh, sorry. Okay, then we're at Edward.
Yeah. My 2 cents is I've seen people getting vaccinated, like in the engineering faculty. There doesn't seem to be issues with that. I think right now a stance that we could take is that we're in agreement with scientific and evidence-based decision-making practices and are looking to the recommendations of government healthcare panels on directions to move forward. I think that's what we can have right now, and if something changes in the near future, then we can come back to this.
Okay, thanks, Edward. A direct response from Matthew. You're muted.
Thank you. Sort of based on what Edward had to say, and the fact that we aren't scientific experts, we can get a sense of what students believe, but we don't exactly have the knowledge to act on it. I'd like to motion that for a stance, be it resolved that, and I can send it to the chat, Students' Council supports and endorses the stance taken by the Region of Waterloo Public Health on any and all vaccination policies.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
I heard somebody before Cannon.
Catherine.
Okay, Catherine. So Catherine seconds. Okay. Okay, there's a point of privilege or inquiry from Vicky.
I guess as a person who's part of the disability community, it is also having immune compromised system. How other people who might also be in the same boat, who might maybe want to go campus per se, but can't, or it's maybe mandatory for them because of classes, how their immune systems could get affected for people who maybe are not vaccinated yet. So, which does not help the cause of spread, and especially puts those people at risk for getting COVID when they really can't afford it.
Thanks, Vicky. Yeah, and that's a very important perspective. So we are on a new motion now, but there were some comments from earlier. Vicky just spoke, so Manaswi, I think, was next.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to agree with Vincent about how international students may not have access to vaccines as soon as, not even just international students who are abroad, but even international students in Canada have trouble getting access to vaccines. And I also wanted to add that from an ethical perspective, asking for people's personal protected health information is, while I see the appeal of it during current times, it is a slippery slope, and WUSA would have to tread very carefully while endorsing or opposing any such stance. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so Jay had a direct response earlier. So
yes.
Okay.
I just want to say that we can recommend students to take vaccine as soon as possible. As Matthew said, to endorse the stance taken by Waterloo Public Health Unit. They are currently said to get the vaccine as soon as possible, but we cannot force people to get a vaccine at this moment. That's it.
Thanks, Jay. So that brings us to Edward.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to speak to what Manaswi, sorry about the name, pronunciation, said, which is requiring health information. it is an interesting balance we have to strike. I think right now, though, we have precedent in the form that to go to a public school, as an elementary school, you need to have your vaccination records up to date. So I see this as kind of the same principles of we're doing this for the ethical consideration where the needs of the whole outweigh the needs of the privacy considerations of the individuals. It is a balance that needs to get struck, but I think there is precedent for it.
Thanks, Edward. Okay, next is Steph.
Before we get any further down this sort of ethical rabbit hole, I just wanted to, I guess, reframe Matthew's motion and what it means. So at least the way that I see it, it's a question of, do we believe that the Region of Waterloo Public Health will take into consideration all these sort of factors when it comes into play? Do we entrust them as a group to, act on the science and evidence-based policies, and also keeping aware of the fact that not everyone is going to be able to be vaccinated, which I feel like the region and whatnot has acknowledged. If they end up taking a stance that negatively impacts students and that we don't believe is right or ethical or whatnot, a later motion can come to council basically saying, hey, we're going to fight against that. But now it's sort of the question of right now, what are we going to do? And if we say, yeah, you know what, probably whatever Waterloo Health comes up with should be sufficient. If you're comfortable with us saying that, then vote in favor of this motion.
Thanks, Steph. Next is Jasper.
I guess that's a pretty good summary. Could I motion to call the question? Is that
seeing that there are no further speaking points requested, I'll ask you not to call the question and we'll proceed immediately to a vote, just so it saves us having to vote twice.
Oh yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Okay, yes, you can call the question, Jasperin. Does anybody second calling the question?
I do. You also have a POI.
Okay, Cannon seconds the calling the question. There's a point of inquiry from Vicky.
I guess I just want to make sure my point will also somehow be addressed in the sense of people who have bad immune systems, how that's going to be worked out. And I guess it can be discussed later in the finer details.
Yeah, what I'll say, Vicky, is as the execs are sort of spokespeople, this kind of a conversation that we can point to and say, look, this is what our council has said. There are concerns about how we can monitor this. There are concerns about the right for students with compromised immune systems to enjoy public space, and the things that you've brought up. Those are all things that we're going to keep in mind when we're answering. So definitely, yes, your comments are taken very seriously and very happy to have had this discussion, I guess. That being said, we're going to vote on calling the question. So the same old thumbs up in favor, heart opposed. And I don't think you can abstain on calling the question, actually. I think you have to vote one way or the other. Anyway.
You can never force anyone to vote. Robert's rules.
Is that right? I thought there was that does sound right, but anyway. Okay, it appears this is overwhelmingly people are in favor of calling the question. So I will read the motion. Be it resolved that Students' Council supports and endorses the stance taken by Region of Waterloo Public Health on any and all vaccination policies, which was moved by Matthew, seconded by Catherine. And so we will vote on that motion. Does anybody oppose that resolution just read? Does anybody wish to abstain? Okay, Manaswi opposes that motion. Otherwise, it carries. Manaswi, would you like your vote noted?
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay. Cool. All right, that dispenses of item 7.9. New business. Any councillor may raise any item of concern during new business by proposing a motion or topic of discussion. 2/3 majority, supermajority is required for consideration of an item. Matthew.
I am so sincerely sorry, everybody. I discovered during the meeting that in order to move forward with the WUSA Box initiative, as I outlined at the start of the meeting, there is a Students' Council policy that will need to be suspended just to allow board to make that decision. Students' Council seemed broadly happy with it earlier, but I would like to put forward a motion, whereas the WUSA Box initiative benefits from an expedited timeline, be it resolved that Students' Council suspends policy 66.
Sorry, Matthew, can I just finish your motion to make it a bit more specific?
Yeah, sure, go right ahead.
Policy 66 to allow board of directors to directly approve the money required for the WUSA boxes without having to go through BAC, as this is a time-sensitive matter.
Yeah, that helps. Thanks quite a bit. I'm just a little bit, I guess we're all tired.
Okay, so the motion has been moved and seconded. However, oh
my God.
Edwards, okay. Is this the same motion?
No, it's different from the one I sent you. I fixed it to make it what Matt was trying to say, if he wants to accept this wording.
Just scanning it over, it all looks
also
good.
Matthew, sorry.
Yeah.
Ben, we need a 2/3 majority to even discuss the
I know,
motion
that's
wording.
what I'm thinking, like, okay, so I'll put in the chat, consider. So are we going to consider a motion on suspending policy to for the WUSA Box initiative? Same deal, Heart React, blah, 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 blah. Thanks, Gannon. Okay. It appears this is supermajority territory. So we will consider the motion, then moved by Edward. Can we take Edward's motion, Matthew?
Yes, I will take Edward's motion.
Okay. So whereas the WUSA Box program was an initiative last year during spring fall 2020 to send out boxes of swag and information about WUSA to incoming students during a time where student engagement was difficult due to the pandemic, and provided students with information about their student association. And whereas Students' Council recognizes the benefits that the WUSA Box program had for incoming and current students and would like to see a similar program for this year, be it resolved that Students' Council authorizes the cost of running the WUSA Box program for the 2021 year, suspending policy 66 to allow the board of directors to directly approve the money without having to go through BAC, since it is a time-sensitive matter. This is moved by Edward. I'll take Matthew as the seconder. We kind of already discussed it. So does anybody have any questions? Hearing none. Does anybody oppose the motion? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, carries unanimously. Edward abstains, and I guess we'll note it. Okay. Okay, any other new business?
Adjournment.
Announcements. Are there any announcements? I adjourn this meeting at 4:51.
When's the next meeting, I guess, is the only announcement I usually put in there.
Well, I guess it's the
June 9th, 11th? Or June
yeah,
6th?
I don't know. You'll get an email about it. I'm turning my brain off. Goodbye, people. Thank you for a very long meeting, but thank you for your patience. I promise that most of them are not this much of a slog. Bye.
See you, everybody.
See you
Thank
June
you.
13th.
See you guys.